Hey, I love therapy, and in fact, I've been going to therapy since I was around 6 years old. Though I talk about therapy a lot and may interview some therapists on the show on occasion, nothing that is said in this podcast should be considered a replacement for therapy. If you are struggling, I urge you to please seek guidance from a therapist because you are absolutely worth it. Hello, everyone. You are listening to Wine, Dine, and 69, a podcast about dating, relationships, sex, and self-love. I am your host, Rachel Dalton. I hope everybody's doing well and okay, as well as you can be doing in this hellhole that is 2023's political landscape. Florida, I'm looking at you. Good God, what awful. The news cycle has been awful. We're off to a great and positive and optimistic start for this episode. But, it's actually funny that I talk about being optimistic and, positive or whatever, because that kind of goes along with what we're going to be talking about in the episode today. My guest is Eleni, and we are going to be talking about stress and sex and how stress can affect people's confidence. And it's really interesting that I'm, doing this episode and releasing it when I am. In fact, I'm literally in the middle of editing it right now, but then I had all of these thoughts about how I wanted to tie it to the introduction, and so I stopped editing, and here I am recording the intro. Doing things a little out of order, but that's okay. I recorded this a couple of months ago when shit was like really, really bad. I'm realizing that pretty much since 2020, I've been going through the ringer. I mean, I think we all have. I think that some of us have bounced back faster than others, and it took me a while to bounce back, and I feel like I'm only now just kind of starting to bounce back after the shit show that 2020 was, and then how 2021 unraveled, and how 2023, or how 2022, into 2023 has really been about a lot of growth and about a lot of learning experiences. So when I recorded this interview, you know how they say you have to hit like rock bottom before you go upwards? I recorded this back in February when I was at my rock bottom. That's what it felt like at the time. I'm sure it could have gone lower, but again, we're gonna optimism. But it was so interesting to remember the headspace that I was in at that time and to look at the headspace that I'm in now. And I'm still struggling. I'm still struggling with some career things. Imposter syndrome is hitting me really, really hard this week as I record this intro, as it was at the time that I recorded this interview. But listening back to this episode, it's been so interesting to remind myself to give myself grace and to be gentle with myself. And really just remind myself of all of the positive things about me and the skills that I do have, and to have more confidence in myself. I think I uncovered a really interesting personal nugget in the middle of this interview. So yeah, I've learned a ton about myself since then. I've learned that I'm really retrospective and that I like to try to find patterns because it helps to ease my anxiety. I've learned that I have a lot more confidence when it comes to my emotional world than I do when it comes to like my career world. It's just so interesting that there are still so many things that I'm understanding about myself. And, back like 5 years ago, I remember I thought I had it all fucking figured out. I was 27 and I was almost like, I look back and I'm like, God, that bitch was so cocky, because I just really thought that I like had it all figured out. And I was so wrong. And the last 5 years have been such a humbling experience, and really teaching me the meaning of humility and, allowing myself to give myself that space to grow. So I've learned a lot in the last, however long it's been, 5 years, I guess I just said, but really, since 2020. And I've also learned a lot since I recorded this interview. A ton about myself, a ton about my relationship with my partner, a ton about my dynamics with other people, a ton about myself and my partner in like the sexual sense. I learned about the Kivin method. Highly recommend that people check that out. It's basically like sideways oral for vulva owners, and it is it's different and lovely, and everybody should just go give it a try. Highly recommend. I'll put a link in the episode notes. And, next up on that list and that little journey is learning more about the A-spot and learning more about cat position. What are those? Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked. We're going to talk about them in a future intro. But if you want a little teaser, I'm putting them also in the episode notes. Just really taking an opportunity to learn a lot about myself, a lot about my body, a lot about the people in my life around me, and how I interact in relationship with them. It's been a fucking journey, y'all. Anyway, with all of that being said, I'm checking to make sure that I covered all of my notes that I jotted down. It looks like I did. Eleni is phenomenal and has so many good practical tips for people who are dealing with sexual confidence issues, whether that has to do with, being stressed out or having body image issues, or, maybe you're the person with a stronger libido at the moment and you are feeling a lack of, you're feeling like your partner doesn't have desire for you. So this kind of covers all of that. We're going to dive into how you can kind of take time to slowly regain that confidence back, and how it's a very personal and very individual journey. But that how you can come back to a place of sexual confidence, sexual empowerment, and desire, and have the best sexual life ever. So yeah, without further ado, I guess I'm going to cut to a quick commercial break. You guys have no idea how many times I try to say that fast, and I was always like, hey, commercial break, and then I have to edit it out. It's probably like every other time that I record an intro. And now but oh well. Anyway, all right, commercial, and then please enjoy my conversation with Eleni. So CBD is great, right? Sex is great, right? Okay, so what happens when you put the two of them together? What you get is Honey Pot CBD infused personal lubricant. Created by a couple who is wonderfully in love, Dennis and Jesse, Honey Pot is the perfect lube to level up your sex life. They also have an intimate romantic massage oil to get you revved up and started, called Romantic Escapades. You're definitely going to want to try these products. This wonderful couple put a ton of work into them, and if you want to learn more about them and their story, you can go ahead and visit that episode 59. Wouldn't it be great if it were 69? It really would have been. Oh well. Anyway, give Honey Pot a try, give Romantic Escapades a try, and let me know what you think. You can go and learn more about them at fantasticescapades.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am here today with Eleni Economides, and I am super excited. We are going to talk about stress and confidence and sex and all of these really nitty-gritty things that really everybody struggles with. I feel like I myself have been struggling with a lot of stress lately. But before we jump into all of the details, how about you go ahead and take some time to tell me and listeners about you, your story, and how you kind of came to be here.
Well, hi, Rachel. Thank you for having me. This has been as much of a professional journey as much as it has been a personal one for me as a woman. So how far back do I go?
Some people start at childhood. You can start there if you want.
Well, I think a good place for me to start that story would be, you know, coming out of the role of a stay-home mom
Okay.
when I had my children. I guess it was a time for me that it was, even though it was a decision to stop my position. I was working for a community mental health
Oh, okay.
agency as a marriage and family therapist. And when I was pregnant with my first baby, I decided that I was going to stay home. Well, to, deliver and just stay with the baby for a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. And that turned into a 6 year endeavor, because then I had two more babies. And um, I caught myself at some point starting to get a little unhappy and
Mm-hmm.
struggling with just this role of being a stay-home mom and also having been a professional woman. I felt like I was losing my identity, so it was time for me to go back to work. And um, I also had experienced at the time, as I was experiencing as a married woman, just a change in that relationship with my
Mm-hmm.
husband. Things have gotten more, like just the everyday life and the stress of raising three young kids. It had taken a toll on my sexual desire personally. And this kind of, the charm of the first couple years of a relationship where the novelty is high and there is more excitement. So I decided I was going to go back to work and start a private practice, because that was the only thing that made sense for me, that I could make my own hours and work with couples, because I wanted to, understand that better for myself,
Sure.
struggling in my couplehood. So I started taking training after training on couples therapy. And soon after that, by soon I mean a few years into, being a couples therapist, the need for more education around sex and sexuality became apparent, because working with couples, the topic of sex would uh, often come up, or I caught myself being uncomfortable bringing it up, thinking that I
Sure.
didn't know enough. So then that led to my sex therapy sort of certification, and I wanted to understand better for myself and for the couples that I was trying to help, because I felt like I was spinning my wheels when sex was not part of the discussion with my couples. They seemed to be, making some progress, but not really uh, getting over that hump. Like a lot of
Right.
couples go to couples therapy wanting to improve the relationship and hoping that that will improve the sex in the relationship, and that often is not, even though it helps, it's not always the case. That was a
Yeah.
very long answer to your question.
No, no. I mean, it's fascinating, right? I mean, you said like, sex frequently comes up between, and it reminded me of, the statistic that I read that most arguments between couples are either about children, money, or sex. Um,
Mhm. It's one of the hot topics, yes.
yeah, yeah. But it also, reminds me so much of my mother's story and how, she exited the workforce as many women, do,
Mhm.
and coming back into it. And yeah, I mean, I have found that when couples come to therapy and
Mhm.
or go to therapy, they don't come to me. I'm not a therapist, but when couples have a sex issue, there's usually a bigger core emotional issue, and the sex is the sexual incompatibility or the sexual, lack of sexual desire is usually a symptom of a bigger issue. Would you say that it's the case that once the core bigger issue is resolved, that the sex kind of improves naturally with it?
Well, I think that yes and no.
Okay.
And yes, because what you just described is true for some couples. And oftentimes, of course, there's a connection between how close and connected you feel to your partner and the desire that you have to engage in sexual intimacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes the opposite can also be true. Meaning, when one partner, and I mean that that often is the female partner, but I don't want to overgeneralize and say that's the case, but When one partner lacks, I will call it sexual confidence for lack of a better word right
Mm-hmm.
now, but lacks the comfort within their sexual self and their ability to relate to it in a in a way that doesn't produce stress for them, then sex happens more easily. But when one struggles with that, sometimes it's easier to stay emotionally distant and
Right.
perhaps even pick fights to create that emotional distance because then sex is not on the table.
That's so true. Yeah, I've definitely
So,
experienced that in my life.
yes, yes. So sometimes it is actually a separate issue, right? The lack of sexual comfort can create emotional distance and arguing because that's a safer way for the person with a sexual anxiety to not feel threatened if sex is on the table.
Right. No, that's such a good point. And you kind of touched on confidence there, but another thing that you talk about is stress in sex. And I imagine that when somebody is lacking in confidence, that is, stressful in a
Mhm.
partnership. But talk to me a little bit about the link between stress and sex and why that impacts women so intensely.
Mhm. Well, when one is stressed, your sympathetic nervous system is activated, right? That fight or flight response. And you're sort of like alert and trying to find a solution to something and sort of want to get it done. In order for sexual desire to develop, you sort of want both your sympathetic nervous system and your parasympathetic nervous system, which is, the system that's responsible for relaxation and kind of, calming down and being quiet and present. Both those systems need to be balanced. So when one is stressed, the parasympathetic system is sort of like numb. And it's very, very difficult to become become aroused and to
Mm, mm-hmm.
sort of relax and be and let feel the things in your body and want to have mental space for it. So women obviously, they're called to fulfill so many roles and there's pressure to both be a professional woman and a homemaker and a mother and whatever depending on the roles that each woman has in their life. So wanting to do everything and do it well, this tendency for perfectionism and just being great at everything often adds this kind of stress for women that doesn't leave much space for um, that sexual part of themselves to thrive.
Right. It's funny. I often find that I say this all the time. My listeners are probably sick of hearing it, but that the interviews that I have set up are usually perfect timing for whatever I'm experiencing in my personal life. And I have experienced a past month of insane amounts of stress, like really, truly. And I told, my partner recently, I was like, I kind of feel like a computer.
Hmm.
Like I kind of, because it's like I'm programmed that I have to accomplish all of these things in this short period of time. And I have a one track mind and is getting these things done. And I'm focused and I am stressed. And it's almost like I cease to be an emotional being.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
obviously, I am an emotional being because there are things that happen and I get upset because they're getting in the way of my ultimate goal, which is, in this case, a really intense work deadline. But at the same time, like it's like I'm unable to relate in a more like relaxed, personal, emotional way. Um, and it sounds like I'm not alone in that. I mean, it sounds like that's what a lot of people experience, just this pressure. And I like that you talked about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems because it's that fight, flight, freeze or fawn response, right?
Hmm.
And I guess my response, is a mix of first freeze and then fight. And it's tough when you're that stressed out. It doesn't leave a lot of room for you
Hmm.
to be present within your own body.
Yeah, yeah, it makes it difficult to just relax and be. I mean, no one is immune to stress, right?
Hmm.
Men experience that as well for many other different reasons. But it definitely creates that paradox between what role should I fulfill first, and feeling as if, you're falling short, whichever one you put your attention to. And then that also is something that creates stress, right? This kind of feeling that if I focus on work, I'm disappointing someone at home. If I focus too much at home, I'm disappointing someone at work. And that's sort of an added layer of stress, like feeling, if I had a penny every time somebody said to me that they don't feel good enough, uh,
Hmm.
that thought and that feeling creates extra stress.
Yeah, which doesn't help the situation at all, but
Yeah.
it's part of the human condition. And when you don't feel good and you lack that confidence, I mean, that's another thing that we're going to talk about, like confidence and sex. It's such a loaded topic because so many different things can play into it. There are, expectations from porn. I was just talking to somebody who had they had a partner who had high expectations about how they should act because they had been desensitized or had an idea of how sex should look from porn. There are body image issues. What advice do you have for people who are, there's two different parts to this. There's a stress part and then there's the confidence part. But what advice do you have for women who are lacking confidence in the bedroom, whether it be from, body image issues or not acting like a woman in a porn video might, whatever the issues might be?
Hmm. I find that there's, what you described, which is misinformation about sex, and there's this just lack of sufficient sex education.
Right.
People resort to, unfortunately, porn. When I say people, I mean teenagers. It
Yes.
starts
Yes.
that early, right? Because of this lack of sufficient sex education, or even accurate sex education, misinformation. There's so many myths that go around about sex, so people learn the wrong way. They assume that's normal and the right way to do things, what they see in porn, what they hear from peers, what they learn from social media, and they kind of expect to see that in their sex lives, and they push for
Hmm.
that. And
Hmm.
women fall for that trap as much as men do, right? Putting that pressure on themselves to have a certain kind of body
Right.
image, and then perceiving that others want that from them as well, right? The human brain has this tendency to compare, right? We compare ourselves to others, and we then, I'm going to talk about a little bit something that I think it's important to touch on, because I think it's also the way out of this conundrum. you know we compare ourselves to others, and then we don't we see that what we look like is not like what we think it should look like, right?
Right.
And then we conclude that others will judge us or not want us. Then we proceed to experience shame and rejection, so which of course is not going to make us want to take our clothes off. Um,
Absolutely.
and then it's hard to see that this this pain we experience is really due to our own projection of our own self judgment. Like, we have judgments about ourselves because we compare ourselves, and then we think that other ones are rejecting and judging us as well. So learning how to actually stop judging oneself, and learning how to accept and love ourselves unconditionally, I believe, is the antidote to all of this.
Absolutely.
And it's actually something we need to learn how to do. We're not, nobody teaches us that, unfortunately.
No. Well, it's very, I mean, sex education, you talked about the misinformation too that we are getting, men and women, and a common, you talked about how men experience sex too. So let's touch on men for a minute. There is a piece of misinformation out there that men want sex all the time, and that if they say that they don't, then there's something wrong with them, or that there's something wrong with you, which is simply not the case. Men experience stress, men experience confidence issues. And this idea that men just want to fuck anybody that moves is really, really dangerous. And I know a lot of women who have fallen into that misinformed thinking.
That's right. You're absolutely correct. There is this pressure for men to be, the higher sexual desire partner, and that comes with a lot of shame when one cannot identify as the high desire partner in a relationship. And women fall for this too, right? My partner should be if the partner is male, should be the one. Why am I the one wanting it more? What does that mean?
Right.
They're attracted to me. So we start making up stories, and we create the added stress that then is sort of taking a life of its own, because then you have, we all know what our partner wants and needs from us. And when we feel we cannot give it to them, then that there's fear that builds up with that. And it's another word to say performance anxiety.
Sure.
But yeah, it's equally existent for men as it is for women, and it can look differently that way. There is a pressure for higher sexual desire, the same way that there is a pressure for women to be caretakers and sort of like pleasers and obliging in things. Um, uh, does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, it completely makes sense. And I think that, I mean, it really makes me lament the state of sex education in the world.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's not just about sex. It's not just about like, this is how a baby is made. This is how, pregnancy works. This is what STIs look like or whatever, right? It's about interacting with people of the different sex, and it's about understanding people as individuals and not just as statistics or as numbers. And it seems like in sex ed, there's such a focus right now on just getting that information out, because I mean, when I was taking sex education maybe 15 years ago, like I got the impression that the teacher didn't like it any more than I did. So we need to get sex educators in there who are really willing to talk about more of the full picture. But I have a sneaking suspicion that, at least where I am, that in the United States, that educators and parents might not like that. So, but that's getting into a political realm. But I guess what I keep thinking about, it's funny because so many of the questions that I have for you bounce back and forth between stress and confidence and how they both impact sex. But what I'm kind of hearing from you is that it's kind of all part of the same cocktail. Like your stress can impact your confidence, and your confidence can impact your stress levels. And both of those together can impact your sexual desire. Is that correct?
It is. And I want to make a distinction between confidence and self-confidence.
Okay.
Because confidence comes from doing something many times and knowing that you can do it well. Like you have confidence that you can drink a glass of water without spilling it, because you've done it so many times that now you're not even thinking about it. Okay.
Sometimes I don't have that confidence in myself so that I can drink a glass of water, but
but self-confidence is actually something completely different, and it's more appropriate for what we're talking about, because it has to do with an emotional state, with how one thinks and feels about themselves, right? So so self-confidence has to do with holding yourself at high regard and loving yourself even though you know you cannot do something well, and allowing yourself to try new things knowing that it is uncomfortable and not making it a bigger deal than it is, and deciding that you're not going to beat yourself up if you, let's say, if it's B minus and if it's not A plus. So
right.
sexual confidence really is about attempting You know, learning how to really get to the point where you have confidence. Confidence requires to pass by the stage of being self confident and letting yourself learn from a failure and, not making it mean anything about who you are as a person. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I love that nuance and how they play into each other, self-confidence and confidence.
So, self confidence allows for stress to reduce
Huh.
because when you are self confident or when you're working on being self confident, then you're not making things mean more than they do, which is stress, right?
Right.
Which is like, oh my God, I didn't do this right. I didn't do that right. I'm falling behind at this. It's sort of more like, it's okay, one thing at a time. It all will happen. Self confidence allows for stress to come down and for one to pace themselves and to just create a container for life to happen in a more peaceful way.
Yeah. No, that's such a good point. And, I'm thinking about how stressed I've been over the past week. And my normal trick, I just haven't tried it, but you totally sparked a reminder for me that in periods of really high stress in my past, and it's funny because the stress that I'm experiencing now is more professional, which is a stress I'm not used to experiencing. I've changed
Mhm.
careers in the last year. I am accustomed to experiencing emotional stress. And I feel like the thing that I'm usually able to do is to tell myself when I'm experiencing emotional stress, you're going to be able to handle this. You have
Mhm.
handled everything that has happened up until this point, and you will handle many more things after this point. It's going to suck while you're trying to work through it, but you are going to be able to handle this. And that's confidence, is being able to have faith in yourself that you're going to be able to deal with whatever is thrown your way.
Bingo.
And it's so funny. I'm, again, putting these pieces together. I have that confidence when it comes to emotional things. I've had a lot of pretty shitty things happen in my life, in my emotional life. But I haven't really transitioned that same thinking to my professional stress, which is what I'm experiencing now. So I don't know. You just kind of put some pieces together for me there.
Mhm.
Interesting. But, well, I guess advice for partners. So, asking for my boyfriend. When women are experiencing stress or confidence issues, and as we've talked about, there's a lot of interplay there. What advice do you have for partners of stressed out women or women who lack confidence? Because I imagine that's really frustrating.
Mhm.
To love this person and to want them to see themselves the way that you see them, or to want to be intimate with them. And yeah, like what advice do you have for
Mhm.
people who are partners of stressed out and women who lack confidence?
Well, I think it's important to remember that we are all in this together and that we feel more similarly than we think, right? So compassion can go a long way. So if your partner is stressed out and not able to settle down, kindness really does wonders. A warm look or a hug can be so helpful. A sweet word or like an honest attempt to connect and create that can create instant intimacy. Now, I don't know if what you're just, sort of like asking has to do with actually stressed women and sex in a relationship, advice for partners around that, or in general, but really if it is about sex and intimacy, sexual intimacy, it can sound like I miss you and I want to connect with you,
Mm-hmm.
or let's make some time for us, or tell me when you have some mental space for me. When a woman hears, "Tell me when you have some mental space for me," or "Let's make some time for us. I want to connect with you," from a partner,
Mm-hmm.
I think regardless how stressed she is, it's almost like I believe that for myself, but also my experience with other women is that it's almost like an instant, like a diffuser. It's a
Yeah.
stress reliever on its own. What do you think?
Yeah, I hear that. Like just knowing that your partner isn't, putting that additional pressure on you, or that they see you and they validate you, and that them just saying, I know that you're stressed. Let me know
Hmm.
when we can schedule some time for us. It's, not saying I need time right now. It's not saying, it's not making it negative. It's acknowledging that there's stress and saying, I want to connect with you. How
Yeah,
can we
you,
make that happen?
yeah, yeah. You neglecting me is different than I miss you and I want to connect you to
Correct.
connect
Yeah, I
with
would say
you.
that that's true.
Yes, and then for as far as sexual confidence, of course, compliments and affirmations are lovely in a relationship. Coming from a partner, but only if they come as a result of how they feel about you, not because they feel like they have to do it to infuse their partner with confidence. Then it becomes a little bit more, you know it can foster resentment when one feels like they have to validate and infuse their partner with confidence when they're stressed out to make them feel better.
Yeah, it's a bit performative.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think recognizing that and encouraging our partner to sort of learn how to feel more self-confidence, what you just described, to have more faith in themselves, to kind of be kinder with oneself and less harsh, less perfectionistic. Um, I think that's a good thing for a partner to do. Hey, you're being hard on yourself. I think it's impacting your mood. It's impacting the way we're connecting. Uh, is there anything that you can do to take care of yourself? That's different than trying to make them feel better by saying, you look nice, or you're doing a great job, when that might not be the case. Does it make sense what I'm trying to say?
It does. And I've experienced this where, I might be lacking confidence, or, not feeling great about like having body image issues. And my partner will say something, like, well, I think this is not my current partner. This has been, in the past, but we'll say something like, well, I think that you look great. And they've said it as if
Mhm.
that should just take care of the problem.
That's right. It doesn't,
Like
does it?
it doesn't, because if I don't feel good, like, I was in a relationship, gosh, I can't believe it's almost 10 years ago, but my sexual desire was low, and it was low because we weren't emotionally connected. I'm learning that I identify as demisexual. So the sexual desire was very, very low. And, I would say, I don't feel very good about myself. And he'd be like, well, I think that you look great. And so
Mhm.
it's almost like he thought that by saying that I should just be ready to have sex, because if he thinks that I look good, then it's almost like his opinion about me mattered more than mine in his brain,
Mhm. Mhm.
which is not the case. And it made things worse.
Mhm. That's
So I've
that's
definitely
right.
been there.
It can actually feel invalidating rather than validating.
Hmm.
But at the same time, um, in that case, what you're describing, Rachel, you're the only one that can really do anything about it,
Right.
right? Because it comes down to how you feel about yourself and what you think about yourself, and not a partner setting boundaries and saying, I wish I could do something about that, but I cannot help you love yourself more than I love you.
Right. Yeah. External
Uh,
validation is just a band-aid for the validation that you need to give to yourself.
it can be. It can be.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not sustainable, I guess. It can only go so far.
Yeah. No, I've absolutely experienced that in the past. Well, that sounds like really good advice. I mean, I imagine that can be, a frustrating position for a partner. I mean, is there any advice that you have for a partner who is supporting a stressed out or a confidence lacking, or a partner who is lacking in confidence? Is there any advice you have for them for self-care for the partner?
Um, I think, sort of like, I mean, it requires, what I'm saying also requires a person that has self-confidence as well, meaning
Sure.
they hold themselves at high regard, and they're not afraid that if they don't validate their partner, they're going to lose them. Are you following what I'm saying? So that
Absolutely.
one can sustain, hey, I want to help you and I want to do something to, make you feel better, but it seems like I can't do much because you seem to be struggling with yourself. It does require a more emotionally mature person, right? Most people struggle with their own insecurities, and they feed off each other. So I think relationships have to go through that struggle for people to learn how to grow and how to find their own strength and what's the work to be done in a relationship. So I wish I
Mm.
had a good answer for you, Rachel, but it really comes down to actually like setting boundaries, emotional boundaries that are good, meaning, can I really, is this really my responsibility in this relationship, or how can I help my partner? And if it's not my responsibility, how can I be compassionate and loving and really tell them that, they have some work to do and I'm here for them, but I can't do it for them.
No, I think that's a great answer. I mean, one, it depends on the partner, right? Of
Mhm,
course,
mhm,
and their levels of emotional maturity and comfort with themselves. But
mhm,
I mean, yeah, there are lots of question marks surrounding that. So I think that's totally
mhm,
um, a fair way of putting it. But so your overall one of the things that you call yourself is a desire coach. And I kind of, want to talk about desire and what that looks like, whether stress and confidence play into this. But let's kind of talk about being present because I think that when I myself am stressed out, I lack the ability to be present in my own body.
mhm,
How does being in touch with your physical self play into desire?
mhm. um, well, I'm trying to find the less complicated
Sure,
answer.
sure. Nothing that we're touching on is simple. I
and
understand that.
and because I'm also a therapist and a coach, it's sort of like I have two different perspectives on this. But
Totally.
really, I think every woman owes to kind of educate herself a little bit about female sexual desire. And luckily, I hear a lot more things coming out on Netflix and books and stuff like that. I hear women starting to educate themselves because, really thinking that sexual desire should be there and there's something wrong for us if we don't experience it, it's an added layer of stress that's going to make it harder for it to develop, for desire to develop.
Absolutely.
So understanding that there is two kinds of sexual desire, at least that we know of so far: spontaneous and responsive, right?
Mm-hmm.
One that it's not, it comes easy and naturally, that it's there, and the one that it's not there until you become turned on, and until you have an emotional connection, and until you feel close to someone. Okay.
Right.
The other thing that's important to understand is that for women, arousal comes before desire. Our actual body sometimes has to be physically aroused, or our mind has to be aroused
Yes.
before our body responds with symptoms of, with the feeling of desire. Okay.
Absolutely. That's 1000% the case for me
That's
anyway.
right. So, but we don't know that. We don't know, and we don't know what we don't know. So just knowing that might take off some of the pressure that we put on ourselves to feel it anyways, and to just lay there and, why isn't it happening? So
Yeah.
the other thing is to just, you know learn more about your turn-ons and your turn-offs, right? What turns you on? What turns you off? What are some brakes and accelerators? What gets you going? And what is a deterrent for you sexually, right? And then, if some women do not even admit or think about these things for themselves, because they they just don't know to think about them.
Right. Or to have the language to like
That's right. They
coherently
don't have
process it.
language,
Hmm.
or perhaps even there is a layer of shame about it,
Right. Right.
or judgment that they have about it, that they don't allow themselves to sort of, realize what those turn-ons and what those turn-offs are, and then communicate it to a partner, right? So just spend this really time getting to know yourself and your body sexually, and really know why is it good? Because I mean, why have sex? Why is sex important? And it's important for different reasons to different people, but
Hmm.
why is sex important for you to have? And what is it going to cost you if you don't have sex, or if you don't want to have sex or like sex in a relationship? Really, because this can be a reason that can, on the spectrum from physical to spiritual.
Right.
Why have sex, and why do you want to have sex for yourself? Most a lot of women will have sex because they want to please a partner.
Yes. Unfortunately, that
And
is the
that's right.
driver for a lot of
That's right.
people.
Because they
Yeah.
also learn that that's part of their role and what
Yes.
they need to do in a relationship. And nobody has really taught them that sex can be for you, and it's keeping you healthy, and it's making you, the hormones in your body that are running when you're having sex are wonderful for you. They're good for your heart. They're good for your we don't get to hear that part of sex benefits in our sex education, right?
Right. Right.
So yeah, and we end up resenting our partners because we think we just have to do this for them, and then you know we don't understand how sex can be good for us. Um, and I also think that an important part of really learning how to do this is to be able to, you know, say no from a place of love. When you
Yes.
know you're not in that place mentally or physically, to be able to say no and own it with no guilt, with no fear, and to say it with love, and understanding for your partner, possibly being at a different space in that moment,
Right.
and
Right.
how they might be disappointed by that, and how that's okay.
Yes, it is okay. It's unfortunate and it's difficult, especially if you care about someone, but
Mm.
um, and you want them to be happy, but you can't, as I always say, you cannot pour from an empty cup.
Mhm.
Um, and I guess like I have a question about, as I mentioned, and we kind of talked via email before this. I do identify as demisexuality, and what that or as demisexuality. I do identify as a demisexual. I relate to the concept of demisexuality, and up until this past year, I've really thought that there was something wrong with me,
Mhm.
that I didn't experience. That I could. A lot of people that I know, would be like, will be walking down the street and they'll see somebody and they'll be like, "Oh, I would, fuck the shit out of that person," and I'm just like,
Mhm.
I do not experience that. I do not understand. I can look at somebody and say that's an objectively attractive person, but I do not experience a desire to have sex with somebody without having spoken to them or knowing them, um, on past a surface level. It's
Mhm.
uh, like, and that's what is interesting about demisexuality is, there are different, what is the word that I'm trying to come up with? There are different types of people that you can be attracted to, right? And there are
Mhm.
some people who are gay, and there are some people who are lesbian, and there are some people who are bi, there are some people who are pan. But then, what demisexuality is it's a way of experiencing desire. So like
Mhm.
what are your thoughts on that? How have you worked with people who are demisexual, and do you think, I've heard some people say that, well, that's just, having a healthy connection. Being a healthy person is wanting to have a connection before, having sex. But I do think that demisexuality is different because it's not like you're making a choice. It's just the way that your body
That's
works.
right. That's right. No, it's it's actually a sexual orientation. It's a different. It sounds similar, but it is not the same thing, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
there's people that don't require an emotional connection to want to have sex. And it's almost like pathologizing that when we think we should want to have an emotional connection in order to want to have sex. That's where sometimes I'm gonna reverse what you're saying, because
Sure.
uh, that's where slut shaming comes from,
Right. Right.
right? If you don't have an emotional connection to be having sex, there is something wrong with you, and da 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 da. What you're saying is your orientation is such that only after there is emotional connection you might experience sexual desire with
Right.
that person, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, m- the average person also functions that way, in that they prefer to have an emotional connection in order to,
Right.
want to also connect sexually, but it's totally not necessary. And for a lot of people, the opposite is true, right? For a lot of, especially men, typically, they feel the emotional connection after they have
Right.
had
Right.
sex, and they have those, let's call them, bonding hormones running in the body. So those two are different things. They're very different things. Unfortunately, they sound alike, and probably you're getting a lot of, well, yeah, what's new? Everybody
Yeah,
wants.
dating was a little strange. Because there were some people who were like, well, like that just sounds like, you are a normal person who wants to, have a healthy relationship. And I'm like, no, it's different. It's like I literally, it's like my, I mean, to be crass, like it's like my vagina is shut off until I start to have, deep conversations where I'm feeling connected to this person. Then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I really want to have sex.
Hmm.
But that desire does not exist. And in fact, when I have forced it, there have been 2 occasions, 3 occasions maybe in my life when I have thought, I just want to do casual. Like, I just want to do casual. Everybody else does casual. I want to go through a casual phase. And after I would, do it, I would physically get sick
Hmm.
because my body was rejecting, they were like, you went against what your desire wanted, and were intimate with this person without wanting to be.
Hmm.
My body like rejected casual
Hmm.
sex. And that's kind of when people don't really understand demisexuality, that's kind of how I describe it to them. I describe those experiences.
Yeah. Can
But
I ask you a question
sure.
around that? So most couples argue or fight at some point, and I was wondering how might a fight or argument impact your sexual desire for your partner, the one that you have had an emotional connection with.
Hmm.
And in the moment there is an argument or a fight that might feel like a rupture of that connection. Does that, I imagine it's similar to how it might be for someone that does not identify as demisexual, but I want to hear what you experience.
Yeah. No, I think that it is similar, but it depends on how you fight, right?
Mhm.
Like, so the way that I prefer to fight is me and my partner against the problem. So if a partner is coming to me and telling me how they feel and telling me that it's an issue and really is in good faith coming to me and wanting to solve the problem together, that actually makes me want to have sex with them.
Mhm. Mhm.
But if like going back to that past relationship that I talked about, like if it's just hard-headed two people, me wanting to connect with them and to solve the issue together as a team, and them just not wanting to fight, essentially, yeah, I mean, that sexual desire is just
Mhm.
completely non-existent. But
Mhm.
I have had more than one experience in my life where I'll be in a disagreement with a partner, and once it's resolved, I almost need sex to like seal the deal, seal the
Mhm.
argument off.
Mhm.
And it's only been recently that I've realized that, like, oh, maybe that's, some level of the demisexuality coming into play.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. Nice. Nice. Okay.
Yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
It does. It does. It does. It sounds of course that you probably vibe better with a person that is more emotionally mature and kind of uh, values emotional closeness and connection as
Right.
well.
Yeah, and that way, like, if we're fighting, like, I mean,
Mhm.
what better is it than to, fight, quote unquote, have a disagreement with your partner, and then at the very end of it, you're like, okay, I like love you even more now, and now I want to have sex. Like, that's like the perfect situation in my book.
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
Okay. And can I ask one more question?
yeah, absolutely.
And how would you handle like a partner's possible insecurity around their own attractiveness or desirability when that may not be the focus of a romantic relationship for
Mm.
you? I wonder if, I mean, that's an assumption on my part that it might not be, but have you had the experience where that you had a partner where they were insecure or they wanted your validation around their sexual attractiveness and desirability that you felt sort of a conflict about? Was there any ever such a thing?
Yeah, I was thinking about this and as you were saying it, and I don't know that I've ever had I mean, I've also dated, a series of really, really confident people.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
frankly, I would say maybe too confident and needed some humility. So I think that that's not really an issue that I've ever had. If
Mm-hmm.
anybody is ever feeling a lack of confidence in themselves in a relationship, it's usually me.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I
Mm-hmm.
thought about that. I was like, oh, like, no, all of my past relationships, like, they've all been super confident.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I think that I can't imagine being in that situation. I have friends, of course, who have spoken to me about their insecurities about physicality. And I imagine that I would handle it the same way that I would handle that, which is just to, kind of like we were talking about before, encourage the self-love aspect and
Mm-hmm.
remind them of why they're incredible outside of the physical, um, and what I value about them, but also try to remind them or to get them to start thinking of things that they value about
Mm-hmm.
themselves,
Mm-hmm.
because as we said, like, external holds much less weight than the internal.
That's right. That's right.
So, but yeah, it's interesting the how demisexuality like plays into desire and relationships. It's a whole new world. I've only been kind of exploring it for maybe 9 months now, so
Mm-hmm.
it's been really interesting.
Okay.
Well, we're kind of running down on time here, but I kind of have two more questions, and maybe we can lump them together.
Okay.
Um, do you have advice for keeping things fresh and interesting in a dynamic? And what do you wish that men knew about women and sex?
Ooh, I think I'm going to start with the second part.
That's okay.
I wish that men knew about women and sex what women need to know about women
Sure.
and sex,
Yes.
so that people in general can stop taking things so personally and making meaning from it that does not serve them. What I'm talking about is, spontaneous versus responsive desire,
Right.
the importance of foreplay mentally, emotionally, as well as physically, right? And sort of this all that applies to women. It's true for them, right? Turn offs and turn ons, and just being willing to really learn together and not. There's no right way to do this. There's no perfect way to do this. It shouldn't look one certain way, certainly not the way it looks in porn. That's what I would like men to know.
Yes.
And developing a more flexible sexual style, one that is not goal oriented,
Oh my gosh.
meaning,
Yes.
orgasm is the goal and we need to get to the finish line. It's really going to help them as well because it just removes so much pressure, and developing a more pleasure oriented style, and just kind of rolling around naked is okay too. It doesn't have to be penetration. It doesn't have to end with an orgasm. I
Yes.
think that would be so important and helpful Just and also the other thing, sometimes you just need to start something without having an expectation that you're gonna go all the way. I think I'm saying the same thing. I think that's valuable for both men and women. It's almost like
Mm-hmm.
putting your running shoes on if you want to learn how to eventually get to the gym.
Yes.
Sometimes the advice is just put your sneakers on. You don't need to do anything else. That's what I'm talking about. Allow the woman to just be, and just smaller gestures of sexual intimacy are equally valuable as having a 5-course meal with an orgasm at the end.
Yeah, that has its time and its place, but I mean,
Mhm. Mhm.
lest we forget, only like 25% of women can orgasm from penetration. I will recite that statistic over and over again until the day I die.
I mean, penetration alone, it's actually less than that.
Yeah, like if to have some foreplay and then penetration, and then if gosh, yeah, to
Without
have just
probe.
penetration, I can't even imagine.
Yeah. Which brings me to keeping things fresh and interesting. I mean, things that work for a couple might not work for another. But certainly being willing to obviously try new things. First of all, bring some lube.
Gosh,
Whatever
yes.
you do, just bring some lube and a vibrator, and knowing that clitoral stimulation is critical. It's very important for women. Okay.
Yes.
And and the willingness to sort of um, evolve and grow. I think great sex is an indication of personal development, and it leads to personal development. It requires personal growth.
Mm-hmm.
And just small things can make such a big difference, whether it is a new, let's say, different room other than the bedroom, or perhaps a bit of a role play for some couples that will not work, sort of pretending that you are just dating and you're relearning what each person likes. Sometimes we forget that we change, like what your
Yes,
partner
yes.
liked when you first met them, and even what their favorite color was might be different now. And sort of, being willing to like be creative and try something. Most of us get really shy with our long-term partners to do that. Just drop that.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is a lot of curiosity can go a
Yeah.
long, long way.
Yeah, don't think you know.
Yes.
Yes.
We are always changing, always growing and
Yes,
evolving.
that's right.
Well, Eleni, thank you so much for coming on today. I mean, do you have any last pieces of advice? Do you want to talk about where people can find you? Now's kind of your time to wrap up and let us know how we can continue to learn from you going forward.
Okay. Where people can find me. Let's see. My website is newintimacy.com, and I specifically work with women that experience stress in the bedroom and low libido, and I help them develop sexual confidence and learn how to manage their mind and their stress level in the bedroom. And I've been I developed this class that is how to spark your sexual desire. It's a free
Ooh,
master class. And if people are interested in learning more about that, they can find it on my website, newintimacy.com/sexual desire masterclass. Okay.
okay.
That is one way they can sort of get some more information from me. And then I also have this kind of challenge that I developed. It's a week-long challenge on how to develop sexual confidence. And so it's like a daily email with a video that you receive and stuff. So it's newintimacy.com/sexual confidence. Sign up. Those are my two gifts for your audience if they're interested in kind of developing that part of their you know relationship with themselves a little bit more. And Eleni at newintimacy.com is my email. You can just ask questions or schedule a free consultation. I offer a free mini session. I guess if somebody goes on the website, they can find that information.
Amazing. Well, Eleni, thank you so much for your time today and for all of these great nuggets of wisdom. I definitely feel like I feel less stressed just talking about it. And yeah, I hope that my listeners take away some valuable information too.
Wonderful. I hope so too. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you, everyone, for listening today. My name is Rachel Dalton. You've been listening to Wine, Dine, and 69, and let's keep talking.